Imagine a city where drinking coffee was a crime. Yes, the same coffee that wakes us up every morning, once feared, once banned. In this city, beans were smuggled in the dark. Families brewed it secretly behind closed doors, and if the aroma escaped into the street, it was seen as rebellion. Hard to believe that a single cup of coffee could be considered dangerous enough to threaten rulers? Let's turn back the pages of history to the city that banned coffee. There's a strange truth tucked away in the dusty corners of history. Once upon a time, there was a city where coffee was not welcome. Imagine that for a moment. Today, coffee shops are on every street corner, and millions of people cannot even imagine starting their day without that warm, bitter drink. But in the 17th and 18th centuries, there were places in the world where coffee was seen as suspicious, dangerous, even sinful. This story takes us back to a city that, for a time, declared war on coffee. It is not a dramatic war with swords or cannons, but a quieter, slower battle. A cultural struggle about who held power, who shaped daily life, and who had the right to drink from a steaming cup. A drink arrives from distant lands. Coffee did not begin in Europe. Its story began in the highlands of Ethiopia, then traveled through Yemen and across the Ottoman world. By the time it reached the great cities of Europe in the 17th century, it was already centuries old, carrying with it a long tradition of gathering, conversation, and energy. When coffee arrived in places like London, Paris, and Vienna, it quickly became more than a drink. It became a habit, a ritual, a reason for people to meet. Coffee houses appeared almost overnight. People sat in them for hours, talking about books, politics, and trade. These new public spaces were buzzing with ideas and with caffeine. But to rulers, kings, and city leaders, that buzz was not always welcome. The suspicion of coffee. The city that banned coffee was not alone. At different times in history, rulers in Mecca, Cairo, Constantinople, and even parts of Europe had tried to forbid coffee. Why? Because coffee houses became places where ordinary people gathered to talk. And whenever ordinary people gathered to talk, rulers began to worry. In one city in Europe, officials declared that coffee was corrupting the morals of young men. They said the bitter drink led people to gossip, waste time, and plot against the government. Priests claimed that coffee was too foreign, too connected to Muslim lands, and therefore dangerous for Christian souls. Merchants who sold wine and beer complained that coffee was ruining their trade. And so, the city council passed a law. Coffee was banned. The sale, the brewing, and even the drinking of coffee within the city walls were forbidden. Life without coffee. Imagine walking through that city. The streets are quieter because the coffee houses have been shut down. Their wooden signs, once swinging above the doors, are taken down. The smell of roasted beans, once drifting to the morning air, has vanished. Instead, people gather in taverns where ale and beer is served. The conversations are heavier, the laughter a little louder, the nights longer, but something is missing. Coffee had offered a place where ideas could be shared in sobriety, where the mind stayed sharp. Without coffee, the city feels less curious, less connected. People begin to whisper. Some say they miss the taste. Others miss the talk. A few daring souls continue to brew it secretly in their homes, carefully hiding the smell from neighbors. To drink coffee becomes almost an act of rebellion, a small protest against authority. The leaders fear. Why would leaders care so much about a drink? The answer lies not in the cup, but in the conversations around it. Coffee houses had quickly become the unofficial offices of early modern cities. Writers drafted poems there. Merchants closed business deals. Students debated philosophy. And ordinary workers discussed the problems of daily life. In the eyes of rulers, this was dangerous. A city where people gathered to talk was a city where ideas could spread, and ideas could lead to protest or even revolution. By banning coffee, leaders thought they could control the conversation. They believed that shutting the doors of coffee houses meant shutting the mouths of their citizens. A quiet resistance. But people are stubborn. The ban was not easy to enforce. Just as with later bans on alcohol or tobacco, the craving did not disappear simply because a law said so. Coffee beans were smuggled into the city. Secret gatherings continued in private homes. In some places, hidden coffee houses operated behind false walls or disguised as bakeries. One traveler wrote of a small gathering he attended in a banned city. The host poured coffee into plain mugs, pretending it was just broth, while the guests smiled knowingly. The ban, it seemed, only made the drink more desirable. The slow return of coffee. The truth was simple. Coffee had become too important to stay forbidden forever. The same rulers who feared it also found themselves enjoying it. Diplomats traveling abroad acquired the taste. Wealthy families wanted it served at their tables. Even clergymen who once preached against it eventually drank it before their sermons. Within a few decades, the city quietly dropped its ban. Coffee returned to the streets, first as a luxury for the rich, then as a common habit for everyone. The old coffee houses reopened. The smell returned to the air. Life moved on, but the story of the ban remained. A curious reminder of how something so ordinary today was once considered a threat. Looking back, when we look back on the city that banned coffee, the story may seem almost funny. How can anyone see coffee as dangerous? But history is full of small details that once carried great weight. A drink, a song, a book. Any of these can become a symbol of change, a spark of fear, or a tool of resistance. The ban on coffee reminds us that history is not only about wars and kings. It is also about the quiet choices people make each day. To drink or not to drink. To gather or to stay apart. To speak or to remain silent. Today, as we sip from our mugs without fear, it is worth remembering that once, in a certain city, people risked much for the very same thing. Epilogue, a cup that changed the world. In the end, coffee did not just survive. It thrived. It traveled across oceans, planted in colonies, carried in ships, traded in markets, and poured into homes everywhere. What was once banned became beloved. The city that banned coffee could not hold it back. No wall, no law, no decree could keep a drink of such power from flowing. For coffee was never just a drink. It was, and still is, a reason to gather, to think, to share. And maybe that was a real fear all along.